First up, we're starting with the Stone Age i3. I'm talking about a prehistoric time so old, the word generation hadn't even been invented yet. Jokes apart, these processors are technically just called Core i3. No gen prefix, no fancy labels. Now, you could call them the first generation, but in reality, the numbering system we know today didn't actually kick off until number 2. These relics first crawled out of the Intel labs in Q1 of 2010, packed with a massive, wait for it, 2 cores and 4 threads. They came with Intel HD integrated graphics, which, to be fair, could actually light up a 720p or even a 1080p monitor for your basic stuff. If you're just opening MS Word, scrolling through a PDF, or fighting with an Excel file, you're golden. But try to open Mafia 2 on this thing? Boom, you might need to call 999 and let the firemen take over from there. Why? Because Intel HD graphics were never ever meant for the gaming trenches. Also, keep in mind these chicks only support up to DDR3 RAM, so if your brain functions like an F1 driver, this is definitely not the place where you belong. So who's this for? It's for the day-to-day user, the guy who loves reading the newspaper online, browsing the web, maybe watching a movie, and secretly enjoys playing Road Rash alone in his room while all his friends are outside enjoying a nice round of badminton back in 2010. But today, these are only museum pieces. Moving on to the Middle Ages, we're talking 2nd Gen to 4th Gen i3s. This era stretched all the way from Q1 of 2011 to Q3 of 2014, and honestly, these were the glory days of the budget build. But don't let the dates fool you, we're still stuck in the land of 2 cores and 4 threads. Nothing has changed there. Under the hood, we saw the evolution of Intel HD graphics, moving from the 2000 series all the way up to the Intel HD 4600. Now, could they handle DDR4 RAM? Absolutely not. You were still strictly in DDR3 territory. Performance-wise, these were the champions of the office cubicle. If you're doing regular office work or general day-to-day browsing, they'll survive. And hey, if you're a retro gamer, you can actually fire up Virtua Cop 2 or House of the Dead without the fire department on speed dial this time. But here is the cold, hard truth. Today, I cannot recommend these at all. Why? Because they can't even bear the weight of the latest Windows 11 OS. Unless you're planning on building a dedicated retro arcade or a very glorified paperweight, these chips have officially overstayed their welcome. Next up, the era of the awakening. Moving on to Q3 2015, we get the 6th Gen Skylake and later the 7th Gen Kaby Lake. Honest truth, Intel was basically hitting Control-C, Control-V at the factory. Why? Because we are still stuck on 2 cores and 4 threads. The only shiny new toy here was support for DDR4 RAM, which finally let us say goodbye to the ancient DDR3. Graphics got a bump to Intel HD 530 and 630, which sounds impressive, but let's be real, it's still just enough to run your desktop wallpaper in high definition. You could try to game, but you'd be playing a slideshow, not a video game. But then, in late 2017, something miraculous happened. Intel finally woke up from its nap. Enter the 8th Gen Coffee Lake and 9th Gen Refresh. Boom! For the first time in i3 history, we got 4 physical cores. Yes, you heard that right. Quad-core power on an i3. The 9th Gen even introduced Turbo Boost, so these little chips could finally scream when they needed to. So where do they stand today? If you have a 6th or 7th Gen, I have bad news. You are officially on the Do Not Invite list for Windows 11. Microsoft slammed the door in your face, so unless you love tinkering with bypass hacks, you're stuck in the past. But if you have an 8th or 9th Gen, you're actually in the club. They officially support Windows 11, they handle modern web browsing without breaking a sweat, and with a decent graphics card tossed in, you can actually enjoy competitive titles like Valorant or CS2 without looking like a laggy, glitched-out mess. Next up, we have the 10th Gen i3. I call this one the imposter. Why? Because for the first time in a decade, an i3 wasn't acting like an i3 anymore. Released in Q2 of 2020, the 10th Gen, specifically the i3-10100, did something wild. It finally ditched the 4-thread limit and gave us 4 cores and 8 threads. If you're a tech nerd, you realized something immediately. This was basically an i7-7700K in disguise. Yes, the flagship King from just 3 years ago was now being sold as a budget peasant chip in 2020. Talk about a humbling experience. But of course, Intel had to pull an Intel move. To use this bad boy, you needed a new motherboard with the LGA 1200 socket. So while the processor was cheap, your wallet still felt the pain of upgrading the board. And the graphics? Intel UHD 630. Again. It's like eating leftovers for the third night in a row. It works, it displays your desktop, but don't expect it to run Cyberpunk. It's still strictly for esports titles like Valorant or CSGO on low settings, unless you plug in a real graphics card, in which case this thing turns into a beast. So where does it stand today? This is the gatekeeper of modern gaming. It officially supports Windows 11, it handles modern tasks like a champ, and if you pair it with a budget GPU, you can play almost anything without selling a kidney. Now we arrive at the modern era. The timeline is Q1 2022 to Q1 2023. This is where things get serious. First, enter the 12th gen i3 12100. If the 10th gen was an imposter, the 12th gen was the chosen one. Released in early 2022, this chip brought a brand new architecture called Alder Lake and the new LGA 1700 socket. Now, don't let the 4 cores and 8 threads fool you. These aren't the same old cores. These are performance cores on steroids. This little budget i3 walked into the arena and absolutely destroyed legendary flagships from the past. I'm talking about single-core performance that beats an i9 9900K. Yes, the king of gaming from just 3 years prior got dethroned by a budget i3. It also brought the future with it, support for PCIe 5.0 and the fancy new DDR5 RAM, although let's be real, most of you paired it with cheaper DDR4, and that's totally fine. Then, a year later, in 2023, we got the 13th gen i3 13100, and honestly, it's a clone. While the big brother i5s and i7s got those cool new E-cores for multitasking, the poor little i3 was left out of the party. It still has 4 cores and 8 threads, no E-cores, no massive changes. Basically, Intel took the 12th gen, gave it a double shot of espresso to boost the clock speed by a tiny bit, slapped a 13 sticker on the box, and called it a day. So what's the verdict? These are the current value kings. The 12th gen i3 is arguably the best budget gaming CPU of the last decade. It handles any modern GPU you throw at it, RTX 3060, 4060, you name it. The 13th gen, it's fine, but it's basically just the 12th gen wearing a fake mustache. If you're building a PC today on a strict budget, this is where you stop. You don't look back at the Stone Age, and you don't need to look further unless you have money to burn. Finally, we reach the end of the line, the 14th gen i3 14100. If the 13th gen was a clone, the 14th gen is, well, it's a clone of a clone. Released in January 2024, Intel hyped this up as the Raptor Lake Refresh. But let's be real, it's more like a Raptor Lake nap. While the big boys like the i7 14700K got shiny new E-cores and massive multi-core boosts, the poor little i3 was left in the corner. Again, it still has 4 cores and 8 threads, it still has 0 E-cores. The only difference? Intel squeezed the silicone lemon just hard enough to get a tiny 200 MHz boost, pushing it to 4.7 GHz. That's it. That is the entire upgrade. It's basically a 13th gen that drank an extra cup of coffee this morning. So what's the final verdict? The 14th gen i3 is the definition of why do I exist. If you already own a 12th or 13th gen, upgrading to this is like trading $1 for 4 quarters. You just wasted your time walking to the bank. It performs almost identically to its older brothers in gaming. Unless you find it at the exact same price as the 13th gen, leave it on the shelf. And there you have it, from the Stone Age relics to the modern-day clones. The i3 has come a long way, mostly by changing its name tag and hoping we wouldn't notice.